since the back. Well, my wife's snowball, and we do already in Boston a lot of our dock, so that's to just sort of keep that there. But one son's in Connecticut, he's in Boston. So it's in the car half the time, you know. But, yeah, Parsons Road, yeah. No, and we were lucky to find, and we can live here.
Everyone can hear me okay?
Hold it away.
Hold it away. This is good?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. I feel like Bob Barker. Come on up! Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Stecker, and I'm the chairperson of the Rye400 committee. I hope you by now have heard that we have the Rye400 celebration this year. It's been quite an incredible journey. How many people have participated in the Rye400 event this year? All right, great, awesome. I want to reflect before we start tonight to talk a little bit about the Rye400 committee as we're almost getting close to wrapping up this year. So it was actually formed by the Rye Historical Society at the request of the town of Rye. So the town of Rye basically said we're going to be celebrating 400 years. This was last year. We need some help, and we formed a committee. Since then, we have planned and executed over 60 events this year. So, of course, we have a committee. You saw, the two Carlos's at the core of the committee. Chief Asher is here tonight, so a lot of people have really been helping. But the one thing I really want to point out, this microphone, we'll have to bear with it. We have a very diverse and a long history in this community. And we basically really try to focus on a number of activities and events that range from historic lectures, from walks, century walks, trolley tours, House of Shoals tour, a tour that actually includes Apple Road and Star Island, beach cleanups, athletic events. Rye Day. Was that fun? Did you guys come to Rye Day? I thought that was awesome. The founding families reunion, very important. This year,
Separate
too bouncy.
Keep it away from your mouth.
Keep it away.
Keep it away. Perfect, perfect.
I really it feels counterintuitive. I apologize. The Odeon family, the Caswell family, and the Locke family this year celebrating reunions, and we worked with them. The art show, we had several art shows here. If you remember in March, we just had one last weekend over at the library. Many educational, events actually supported educational programs for our Rice students. In fact, we just last Thursday had an event at the Atlantic Grill that raised over $25,000 for the new playground. Continuing yellow signs here. We have a picnic coming up this Sunday at Parsons Field. A great new idea. And very exciting historic home tour. And I know I get a lot of emails from people who are disappointed. The homes were sold out in 1 week, 200 tickets, done. So that'll be exciting on December 2nd. Same day, we're gonna have a holiday tree lighting for children, decorating the tree. There's gonna be a petting zoo. I heard that Rudolph might be there. And then we're actually gonna close it out, if you believe it or not, at the beginning. Dennis Robinson, anybody who knows him, is gonna speak about what actually happened in 1623. So that'll be on December 13th at the library. All these events acknowledge our indigenous, our European, and also our enslavement roots, as well as the environmental, economic, and social realities of fishing, farming, tourism, and community activism. And we continue to raise funds, and we'll hear more about this. Whatever is left over at the end of the year that we didn't need to stage these events will actually go back to beneficial causes here in the community. So let's come to tonight. And by the way, this event will be recorded. A lot of people have approached us and say we wish we could be here. Some people are remote. This will be recorded and will be posted on the Rye400 website. So if anybody who cannot make it, is shut-ins or are away, this will be recorded. So one prominent member of our community, which we often refer to here as part of the Rye founding family, is the Philbrick family. There are many branches of the Philbrick family, and the most interesting, and actually where it came from, researching it, actually came originally from Scandinavia and then went over to England. And in England, it's known as Philbrick. It's a parish near Cromer in Norfolk, England. And one famous building that's called the Philbrick Hall is actually spelled F-E-L-B-R-B-R-I-G-E. So this then became, various names, various combinations of this name. And the first Philbrick that I learned came over to Massachusetts in 1633. Now, to our own Philbrick. The gentleman who's sitting to our right, his name is Roger Odeon Philbrick. So if you're from Rye, you get Odeon in Philbrick in your name. That's quite amazing. Roger Odeon Philbrick, who is our special guest tonight, a very well-known and respected member of our Rye community, to say the least. He's a direct descendant of one of the founding families. That family has owned, the Philbrick family has owned, and still operates farmland. It goes back over 300 years. Like his father before him, Roger is a man with many talents who provides other services in Rye in addition to farming. His opinion is very sought after. He has served on very numerous town committees. He plows in the winter, he makes his own maple syrup, he even digs graves at the cemetery. So Roger is a man with many talents, very dedicated and loving man. I've only known Roger for about 6 months, and I'm very appreciative, and Mel passed introducing us about 6 months ago. Roger is phenomenal. So everything I'm reading here, I actually experienced myself. He is a student of history and a recent cover model of Straw Magazine. So tonight we are very honored to hear directly from him. And the man who's going to introduce him and talk with him, we figured, this might be a nice little way to entertain and learn tonight, is actually Mr. Lou Karabatsis, to Roger's left. Lou is retired from a successful career in corporate philanthropy, community relations, and communications. He has held memberships and leadership positions in several national and regional business nonprofit boards. Locally, he is a member of the Rye400 committee and serves as the board secretary of the Rye Circle Society. We also chairs the collections committee. He's the author of several histories, articles on Lowell, Massachusetts, as well as the popular Rye Beach book. So if you guys have this book, this is really awesome. This is called the Postcard Book, or Postcard History, and it's published by Katie College. That's what Lou wrote. So without further ado, Lou, take it from here. Welcome.
Thank you, Andy. How many people know Roger well? Raise your hand. Okay, I don't. I met Roger around the same time Andy did, about 6-7 months ago. And I was fortunate enough to write that piece for Stroll magazine. And people have asked me, gee, how long did it take you to do that? You seem to have caught the real Roger. And honestly, it took me probably less than 30 minutes to write it, because I wrote it the way I felt about him and meeting him. So I don't know that much about him. We've met several times. We've talked about certain things. So tonight, all you people know him. I don't. So we're going to leave you out. Roger and I are going to have a chat. You guys can listen, do what you want, talk amongst yourselves. But Roger and I are going to talk. And afterward, maybe we'll let you ask some questions, okay? So that's how we're going to sort of orchestrate tonight. So it's going to be very informal, very chatty. We're going to try to make it fun and entertaining, okay? So, Mr. Roger Odeon,
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm just fine, thank you.
So, I'm the grandson of immigrants. Both sides came over from Europe, from Greece, to work in the mills in Massachusetts. I only know 2 generations back. So Roger, Woody, and Philbrick, 300 years of family in the same town. I can't relate to that. What sense of responsibility do you have to carry on that legacy? Because that is a massive legacy and a family that has contributed so much to this town. How does that feel to you that you can go all the way back in one place?
I'm very proud of that fact that we've been here for so long. Not that we created the town, but just that we were a part of it in the decision-making and the hard work that we enjoy today. My family's always been the person that you would call on to get some service done. And we really worked at the needs of the people.
So let's go back to the beginning. And there are 3 Philbricks we should talk about: Thomas, Jonathan, Joseph. Can you sort of give us an idea of who each of these individuals were and what they contributed in sort of your legacy?
Our ancestor, Thomas Philbrick, was the first one to come to this continent from England. And he came through Salem, Mass. And he went to Watertown in Situate before he landed in Hampton. Now, Hampton and Portsmouth covered the whole seacoast at that time. There was no Newcastle, and there was no Northampton, Hampton Falls, or Seabrook. So the part of Hampton that he settled was actually on the boundary line between Seabrook and Hampton Falls. And his place was still active at the time that the Interstate 95 was put in, because the state took his property to put the turnpike through. And at that point, it shows on maps where they lived on Route 1 after that. And my first, and he actually, he got in trouble because he, according to Parsons' history, was a squatter on public land. But he made amends. He was one of the first selectmen in Rye back in the early 1700s. And the place where the Philbricks settled in Rye would at the ocean end of Central Road, where the Farragut Hotel used to be, and all of that territory down there. Most of it was Philbrick.
Amazing. And then how did the family get to the farm that you currently still have in the family on Central Road?
There was one Philbrick, Joe's Philbrick, who married a law. And the actual, from what I've read, the farm was started by William Law. And his daughter was Abigail, and she married Joe's Philbrick. And they lived in the farm. They were the first Philbricks to live in the farm.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
And that was in 1730, roughly.
You can't hear the lapel one. The microphone, the hand one works better. This one doesn't work very well. In the back, we can hear it.
Okay,
We
so,
cannot hear Roger in the back.
so Roger, we'll have to switch, we'll have to keep doing this.
This microphone is better, isn't it? Can you hear the microphone better? Yeah. You have to share.
Okay.
The lapel one is
Do you want to,
too muffled.
do you want to take this off him? Okay,
The lapel one.
sorry, folks.
You can't hear, it's muffled. Is that okay? Otherwise, people in the back can hear.
Okay, no, it's all right.
Hold it like this.
Do we have a second mic?
Do you want to try if he holds, if he holds?
We can use that one.
How about if we hold a little one?
We're gonna get the second one, the second hand held over here. Sorry about that, folks.
Probably okay. That's fine. You want to turn it on? You want to test? Oh.
Testing. Testing,
No, it's not on you.
testing.
Mic check, 1, 2.
Did you test it?
That sounds better.
Can you hear him back there?
Last row, can you hear?
Say something.
Roger, can
Hello, Aaron.
Okay, so did everyone hear how the farm that's currently on Central Road came into the family? Or should Roger repeat it? Repeat it? Okay. So tell us how the farm came into the family.
The farm was actually started by William Locke. And William Locke had a daughter by the name of Abigail Locke. And Joe's Philbrick, who grew up down at the ocean end of Central Road, married Abigail Locke. And when William Locke died, then they took over the farm. And then the Philbricks were from that point on in roughly 1730.
So how many generations is that to you, Roger? About 10, 11, 12?
I think it's 9.
9. Well, you know, I have trouble visualizing sort of that kind of tree. So we have a little show and tell for you tonight. If you go into, if you happen to be lucky enough to be on the farm, Roger will take you into the barn and show you, I think it was your 2 daughters or granddaughters that did it?
Daughter and a
A
granddaughter.
daughter and a granddaughter. Created for him 8-foot by 8-foot structure of the family tree. So we couldn't bring that in tonight. We tried, but we couldn't. However, through the generosity of Garrett Toohey, right here in the front row, he photographed it and came up with a much manageable solution for us. Roger has not seen this, so he's gonna see it for the first time. Andy's gonna bring it out, and we can visually see, look at this. Look at this, folks.
There you go.
So Roger, tell us now what we're looking at.
Behind him, so the camera. He's got a family on the other.
Oh,
Roger's son is on his camera right here. So what are we looking at?
That takes in relatives from,
We're gonna put it up there afterward for people to see it closer.
Andy, could I see that post for you?
Daniel,
Daniel?
Daniel.
This tree starts with my great-grandfather and then proceeds up through the generations till today. Even my future great-granddaughter is on there.
This is amazing. I mean, visually, you can see the extent of the family to this point today. So,
And quite a few of those names on there are sitting in the audience.
Roger's family, stand up. Let's see who you are. Stand up, everybody. The Philbrick, stand up. Look at this. Here we go. Something to be proud of.
John.
I had to be careful what I say.
That's right, because you've got all these people that could doubt you. So let's talk about you specifically then. Tell us who your parents were, what your family makeup was.
I was born 1944. My mother and father met at the Rye School. Our mother came from Milford, New Hampshire. She came to Rye to be a teacher. So they met at the Rye School and fell in love. And from that, they had 5 children.
Sorry.
One,
It'll be better in the end.
Small town America.
You got the volume right in the back.
Just. It takes a reverend to fix this. Thank you, Reverend. Here, take this.
Now it's on.
All right.
Okay,
Try speaking to them.
so they met, they married, and they had 5 children.
and had 5 children.
Right up to your
The
mouth.
first one was a daughter, and then 4 boys. And 2 of my brothers are here tonight in the audience. Unfortunately, we lost our sister and 1 brother.
So you said your father was custodian at the school. I thought he was a farmer.
Yes, but on the farm, to make money is a difficult thing to do. So most farm situations require working off the farm as well. So Dad, in his younger years, he took on work on the outside, one being the school. At that point, he had to be at school 6:30 in the morning to stoke the fire, to put the coal on and bring the school up to temperature so that it was comfortable. By 10 o'clock in the morning, his work ended. And he had a 4-hour window in the middle of the day, which he had to be away from the school. So at that point, he started, it was during World War II, he started going house to house, picking up trash and taking it to the dump, because back then there was gas rationing and tire rationing. So he he filled that little niche, which the Philbricks have done throughout history, filling those little needs.
I know there's Philbricks everywhere. There's a Philbrick this and a Philbrick that and a Philbrick this, right?
Right?
Yeah.
They weren't in competition with each other. They just all filled the need.
So what else did he do? So he did the trash.
As as us boys got older and could help, then he expanded into other fields. Because we lived on a farm, he had a tractor and he put a front loader on it and started going out and doing different kinds of chores for people, whether it was taking down trees. After the 1954 hurricane, he did a lot of cleanup work for the blowdown. And that's about when I started to get out on the trucks and learn to do what we all did.
So what was a typical day like for him on the farm? What would he do in the time when the farm was in full swing? What was his typical day like?
He took part in all aspects of it, but early in the morning, the cows had to be milked, which he shared that responsibility with his brother, Clifton Philbrick, and they would get the cows taken care of. The milk would go in the house, and my aunt and my grandmother would process it, filter it, and put it in the refrigerator. And if they were going to make butter, they'd let it separate to get the cream. And then once the milking was done, everybody went in their own direction. Whatever work they did, they would go off and take care of that for the day. As evening came on, then the responsibility was to get back and do the evening chores, which involved milking again. And as we were kids in the neighborhood, our grandmother would give us a penny if we cleaned out the stalls behind the cows. So it was a little bribery, but we learned to work.
What could you buy for a penny?
Back then, penny was a lot.
Yeah.
And around the corner, there was a corner store where we could go buy bubble gum or candy.
What was the name of the store? Do you remember?
The Wilson store.
The Wilson store.
Yeah, at the intersection of Grove Road and Central Road.
Anybody remember that? Yeah? Okay. Did you go for penny candy? So what was, when you started, you said you started driving the equipment and all those things. What was your specific chore as part of that whole process? Did you have one, or did you do a whole lot of things?
My first job was been just handwork. I wasn't allowed to operate any of the chainsaws or any equipment until about 12 years old. And then Dad had cleared a house lot down on Central Road near the Abenaki. He had 2 tractors down there. And we had to get the 2 tractors home. So he said, you take that tractor and I'll go in front of you. So we went up Central Road and we got right to Cable Road intersection, which was totally different than it is today. But we got in that intersection, and here comes the chief of police going in the other direction. So Dad pulls down on the throttle and we went faster. And we put the tractors out of sight. And that afternoon, we were up at the intersection of Fern Avenue and Grove Road, clearing an area where a gentleman was going to put in a swimming pool. And the chief of police came by and backed up, pulled over to the side of the road, and beckoned for my father to come up and, did I see that boy driving that tractor on the road? Nothing ever came of it.
Who was the competition to the Philbrick farm? Was there competition?
Not really. There were other farms that were bigger that produced milk and sold it. We did not sell our milk. In the other work that Dad did, there was other people that did construction work, but not to the degree, the lower level of degree that he did it. There were bigger construction companies, but none that really fit in with the homeowners' needs. It was really not that much competition, except for, and it wasn't a competition, there was another contractor that picked up rubbish in the town of Rye, but it was related to the Rye Water District services, and it really wasn't a competition for that.
So were there crops and animals that was part of the farm for you?
Yes, Dad always raised potatoes. Potatoes was a big crop that we raised in our lifetime. But, and he had a market for the potatoes. He would sell them, excuse me, to the school. They used them in the hot lunch program. And the other usage for him was he always raised pigs, and they could cook the potatoes and feed them to the pigs.
And there's one of the things you brought is a list of slaughtering hogs and those kinds of things. Who did you do that for? Was it for families? Was it for the hotels? What was that branch of the business for?
Back then, a lot of people would raise a pig in their backyard or two pigs. And I can remember going with Dad to different homeowners' places and picking up their pigs and bringing them back to the farm where they would be put in stalls for overnight, and the next day they would be slaughtered.
So what do you do today on the farm that's different than what your parents did?
The difference today is we don't have the animals that need the hay, so we actually have put ourselves into a little more of a challenge because we sell the hay. Now, when I say we make it more of a challenge, because if you've got some hay that isn't of good quality, you can use it yourself. But now our goal is to make good hay all the time so that it is sellable. And there is a market in the town of Rye. There are people with horses and goats that still need hay, and we fulfill that need.
So bring us through a day in your life on working that farm. What's a typical day like for you today?
Today, I'm going to say I'm retired. My wife might not agree, although she does give me a little push in the morning to get me out of the house because I don't get going like I should. But a day on the farm, especially in the summer, would be to go start mowing hay and getting it processed to eventually bale it and pick it up and store it or sell it. during the winter months, we usually try to cut firewood when it's snow on the ground, even in the fall, before there is snow on the ground. One of the things that is important when you're cutting wood is to cut it down before the sap gets up into the tree. Because all the moisture that you get into that wood, you've got to take back out before you can burn it. So you try to cut it down when it's dormant and then stack it and let the sun and the atmosphere dry it out.
Well, you gave me some of your family's history and the farming sort of history, and I was taken by some of the things you said that farmers typically look at. And I want to read some things, and you tell me if it's true and if you did it growing up. When the buds on the oak tree are big as a mouse, it's time to plant the corn.
Excuse me, I didn't complete it. It's as big as a mouse's ear.
Big as a mouse.
That was a sign that it was time to plant the corn.
They did it.
Yes.
Okay. When the dew is on the grass, rain will never come to pass. When the grass is dry at morning light, look for rain before the night.
That's one of the old sayings that our ancestors used to determine the conditions of the next day.
Rain in May, a barn full of hay. Rain in June, twice as soon. What does that mean?
If there's a lot of rain in May, the hay grows well and thick, and therefore when you cut it, you'd have a larger volume, and therefore you'd fill the barn quicker. But if it rained in June, it would even grow more, and you're gonna fill the barn twice as soon.
A ring around the moon is an indication it's going to rain.
That indicates that the atmosphere is condensing overhead and that the clouds are starting to form, and there's a chance that it will rain.
Okay, and what is the needle in the haystack?
What is the needle in a haystack? That takes quite a bit of explanation. Is back in early days, it was a chore to cut the hay. They did it by hand using a scythe. It took 2 men all day to cut 1 acre. And 1 acre is 44,000 square feet. 1 day to cut all of that. So they would gather that hay together and put it in piles, and they would cover it with the covering that I have on the table here is a cover from my great grandfather. Which they would use this to cover the hay pile, called a hay cloth, to keep the dew off it. This isn't heavy enough to keep rain out, but it would keep the dew off, and they would stake it down. There was stakes on each corner. They would stake it down. Before they could do that, they put a rod in the center of the hay pile to hold this up, so the weight of this was not compressing the hay. In the morning, they had to spread that hay back out to dry. But the first thing they had to do was find that stake that was in the center, which was called the needle. And that's where the term, like hunting for the needle in the haystack, comes from. And this one here has my great-grandfather's initials on it. So it must have been possessive of the hay that they had cut. And in some of the photographs that I've seen, it shows several farmers working in the same area picking up the hay. So I assume that they had to put their initials on the cover so that they didn't fight over whose hay it was. I also have the stencil that they use. It's here on the table.
How old is that one?
That stencil would have to be over 100 years old. Don't bother.
No, okay. Okay, so now, Roger, we're gonna talk some trash, okay? Talk trash? What are you people? No, we're not gonna go down that route. I'm talking real trash. This is what I'm talking about. Tell us about, because your father was in that field, and so you went around and collected it. Tell us about the dump and sort of how that has evolved over the years.
Well, back in the 30s, it was getting to the point. Before that, they used to burn all the paper in the kitchen stove, and the animals would get the scraps of food, so they wouldn't have any waste except for glass and tin cans. So those were usually deposited on the property in a out of the way area along a stone wall or something, over a ravine or something like that. But by the 1930s, it was determined that there was a need for a town dump. And what had happened in the meantime, the Farragut Hotel started a dump up in West Rye. When the Farragut Hotel went bankrupt, Frank Drake's grandfather bought that property. And eventually, through town meeting, they agreed upon the town taking care of that dump. And it then developed into the first Rye town dump. At that time, they used to do open burning, but there was no fire hydrants. There was no source of water in the area, so they would accumulate the trash until it was a rainy day. Then on a rainy day, they would set it afire. And the rats that came out of that were unbelievable. Yeah, it was not a very sanitary situation. The dump continued on. It got to the point where they had to put an attendant there because the chance of fire. Plus, there were people coming from other towns to dump their trash and Rye, so it had to be controlled more. So they started locking the dump, and it got to the point where sophistication was telling them that they needed to do something better. So the town of Rye bought a incinerator. And they had it erected. It was a better method, but it still was very smoky. And now it was smoky every day. Instead of just occasionally, they had smoke every day, except for Sundays. The gentleman in Rye, his daughter, was going to get married. He contacted the selectman and asked if he could not burn the dump on that particular Saturday that his daughter was going to be married at the farm. And the reception was on the tennis court next to the farm. For some strange reason, at 4 o'clock that afternoon, the incinerator started burning again. And the smoke came down on the reception. And the town of Rye was in the lawsuit. So eventually, that was court decision was they couldn't use it. So they had to go back and they sold the incinerator and started using landfill type operation. And from there, they've had several landfills, but now it's under a regional situation and the trash goes out of town.
So we're all familiar with the harbor.
Yes.
Your family has a connection to that way back, at least to the idea. Can you tell us a little bit about how the Philbricks were involved in a potential harbor?
Yes, it's a good thing to know and understand. And it's recorded in Parsons' History of Rye about this story. The Joe Philbrick that I mentioned earlier, who married Abigail Locke, had the foresight that along the seacoast, there was no place to get in and out of the ocean if a storm came up. And he proposed to make a harbor in the area of the Northampton Rye town line, slightly into Northampton. And he started to dig a entranceway from the ocean to that pond and decided he needed help. So he petitioned the General Assembly of the state of New Hampshire to hold a lottery so he could raise money. He wanted to raise 6,000 lire to assist in dredging that out. He went before the General Assembly in February of 1754. And he died, got to hold the lottery, but he died in March the next month, and it was never fulfilled. That was in 1754, and it wasn't until 1795 that the town of Rye at town meeting voted to make the harbor where it is today at the end of Harbor Road.
Unbelievable. Let's go back to your coming up in Rye, your being raised in Rye. what did you do as a young man in Rye? What did you do as a young man in Rye for fun? And what did you do that your parents never knew about? Oh, he's not even talking. He's got to think about that.
Well, I just want to be careful what I say. I gotta go home at night.
Your children are here. Be careful.
Depends on what time of year.
Okay, let's do spring.
In the springtime, it was generally just so much to do to get things underway for the season at work, and there really wasn't any playtime at that time. The only time that we really got to ourselves was on Sundays after church. In the summer, we would go to different lakes. Mother would walk us to the beach. We lived on Central Road, but we would have to walk to the beach down Cable Road, pushing the baby carriage, because there was always one of us that was in the baby carriage. But as we got older, we were invited to go through the Grange, and there were several club organizations like the Sewing Club and the Dining Needle Club and the Grange, and some of those members had camps on Great East Lake, and in the summer we would travel to Great East Lake for a picnic, go swimming at Great East Lake. And one of the things that I remember back then, you couldn't go swimming for half an hour after you eat. So they would pack a picnic lunch, and we would stop on the side of the road at a picnic road in Milton, and we'd have our lunch there, so that when we got to the lake, we could go right in the water. You know, that was one of the different things that was done than today. And today, everybody has a swimming pool. I don't know if they even still do that. Don't go in the water for half an hour. And then the winter months, we did snowmobiling and skating in the early winter. That was always a challenge to see if we could get ice before the snow came. But we used to slide on hills and do all kinds of crazy things. But here in Rye, there was a pond down by the Bob Rodden, a little bit older, but he had the experience in the mechanical to have a car to race. So on Sundays, we'd eat lunch, dinner after church. And my brother and I, Richard, we were always anxious to get out of the house because we wanted to go ice racing. And that was a big thing back then for a few years.
Where did you race on the ice?
On the park before you get to the Abenaki.
Oh, okay, that was, okay, yeah.
Back then it was called Burke's Pond. And until Mr. Bales, who owned the pond, realized the insurance risks and said no more.
Recently, we had one of the Rye400 walks was at Odiorn. Specifically focused on World War II and the bunkers and everything there. And there are a couple of people in the audience who were on that walk who had stories about them hanging out with the guys there in the bunkers, and and they know who they are sitting out there. So again, what did you do that was maybe a little out of the norm that your parents didn't know about? See, I'm really trying to get him to admit something.
Yeah, you are. There was one Sunday afternoon we took a trip down there. We weren't there too long before the police were there, so I don't know. That was before they used cameras to detect wrongdoings. But, I honestly don't know how they found out we were there. Probably the car on the side of the road. But we were there to go through the bunkers.
When did you get your first car? When did you get your first car? And what was it?
The first car we shared. My sister actually had she was 2 years older, so she had her license first. And it was a 1953 DeSoto that we shared. And then we didn't care for Chrysler products, so we were always a Ford or Chevy man, so we didn't care for the DeSoto. But I remember once my father was going to buy a car. He made arrangements with the dealer, salesman, to bring the car to him in Rye. Dad had a job where he was cutting brush for homeowners. They lived down on the lower end of Washington Road, but they owned the land all the way to the marsh, and they wanted to be able to look down to the marsh. So Dad was cutting the trees and just dropping them on the ground, didn't have to clean them up. The salesman showed up with a car that Dad was going to buy. Dad reached in his pocket to get his wallet and pay for the car, and his wallet was gone. It had fallen out where he was cutting the brush, and he was devastated. He hunted and hunted and hunted until he found that wallet and saved the day.
All right, we're gonna have a little lightning round here and see what you remember, okay? Where is London Bridge in Rye?
I know where it is, but I wonder how many people sitting in the audience.
Anybody know by a show of hands? Where's London Bridge in Rye? Oh, one back there, way back there. Okay, so you've stumped them, Roger. Where is it?
London Bridge is on the earliest maps of Rye. It shows on the 1805 map as being down on Brackett Road. It's located at the intersection of Brackett Road and Clark Road.
Can everybody picture that? Okay. How are the roads measured in Rye?
When they originally started measuring roads, they figured out the circumference, the distance around a wheel on a wagon, and they marked the wheel at one spot, and they put somebody in the back of the wagon counting the revolutions of that tire, that wheel. And then the next intersection, they calculated the distance of that section of road.
All right, speaking of streets, how are they named? How are the streets named?
Before they named the streets, they were just used whoever lived on that road as Joe Smith's Road or Bob Goss's Road. They didn't give the roads any specific name until the late 1800s at town meeting. Moderator appointed 3 people to name the roads and sent them to the back of the room. And by the end of the meeting, they had a list of names for all the roads. And that was presented to the town and approved at that meeting. That's in the Parsons history of Rye.
And most of them are still the same today.
Yes, they are.
All right, here's a good one. What is a rag hole?
That's a good question. It's one that I could never find the answer to. My father never could answer the question, how it got its name. It's located between Central Road and Fern Avenue, Washington Road and Grove Road. It's a swampy area, which the first Central Road passed through Red Hole. And in Parsons' history, he describes the road as passing through Rag Hole, and I suppose they named it Rag Hole for the abundance of ragweed.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
The one thing that's really fascinating about Parsons' history book, there's so much information in there that's relative to before 1900. But it's difficult to pick it out because it usually relates to where somebody lived. So if you don't have the knowledge of where somebody lives, the information doesn't gel and come together. But there's so much information in that book. It's amazing what he did before there were computers.
So was your father, were your parents and grandparents, did they tell stories of their ancestors or the family or who lived where? Was there that type of passing on of information to you and your siblings?
Yes, probably more from my uncle than from my father, although that's where I benefited over my brothers because I was involved at a younger age. And if we were someplace that something specific had happened or somebody lived or whatever, he told me about it at a young age. So a lot of it didn't make sense then, but as I got older, the light comes on and it does come together. And that's the fascinating part about history. Is if you observe it, and then at a later time, all of a sudden it comes together. I really got interested in history when I read on a cereal box that the Pony Express only lasted 18 months. And that really shocked me because of what we saw on TV as kids describing the Pony Express as a big part of the West. And the fact that it only lasted 18 months and then the railroads took over carrying the mail. But that sparked my interest to find out how all these things connected and why they're important and how long they lasted or how long they didn't last. It's fascinating. History is.
All right, so put your hat back on. Where is Gammon Brook?
In Rye.
Okay.
No. Garmin and goes through the woods underneath the rec road and out into the marsh. My dad would say it's the shortest brook in town and it never goes dry.
Okay, question before we open it up to everyone. Where is Rand's Grove?
Rand Grove is not there anymore, but it was off of Cable Road. Way back in the early 1900s, the electric cars, trolley cars, came through Rye. They were tracked so late as far as the Rye Beach Post Office in 1900. And one of the stops was for Cable Road. And down off of Cable Road, Mr. Rand started a place where he could do clam bakes and picnics. And that's how they got the name Rand Grove.
So what's there now?
Houses.
Houses. All right, we have a microphone in the middle of the floor and of the aisle here. So we welcome questions from you folks to Roger if you've got them. Who would like to be the first one? No questions?
I have a question.
If you just go to the microphone, right behind, so everybody can hear you.
Thank you, John.
Oh, let's make sure it's on real quick.
Thanks. I can just talk loud.
Here,
Yeah.
here you go.
One, two, three. Essay 1, 2, 3.
Here you go, John. Yeah.
How about this?
Perfect.
Hi. So what I was wondering is, from 1733 up until when you were born, were any of your ancestors involved in the Revolutionary War, Civil War, one?
That's one thing that was never talked about in the family. So I honestly, I can't relate to that question.
I'm sorry. Anyway, thank you. Next.
I'm curious where your family would have gone grocery shopping. Your father, mother, their parents, what would that be like? We all go to a market basket or wherever now, but was it local? How does that work?
I didn't get
where did your parents go shopping for food? What, did they go to a local market? How did they do their shopping?
When we were growing up, our mother did not drive an automobile. Our aunt, who lived next door, did drive. So she would take our mother, grocery shopping to Portsmouth. What was called a meat lot, where they stored, on the farm, they raised their own animals, and they slaughtered their animals, and they took them to a place in Portsmouth where they could freeze them and put them in a locker. So every Monday, they would go to that store and get some meat for whatever they for the week and bring that home. On Central Road, Cable Road, and Grove Road was a gentleman who went to people's houses in the morning and took an order, and then he would come back and bring those to the house in the afternoon. And his name was Neil Philbrick. And that's how the rest of it, it was all homemade. Yeah. The biggest thing that was to get enough flour and sugar so Mother could keep on baking. She made all her breads. There was a fish man that would come around once a week. She would buy fish from them.
So would you go into Portsmouth for flour and sugar, or could you get it from the little local stores around here in Rye? Or?
No, it was Portsmouth. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Roger, how did you and your brothers decide who was gonna do what for work?
How did you and your brothers decide who was going to do what for work?
That's a good question. It was more of what each one of us felt comfortable doing. I always felt comfortable with the equipment, and Richard just kind of gravitated to the trash business. Stephen was the only one that really didn't want to go in business for himself. And he went in the Coast Guard right out of, he was the only one, as I say, that really didn't want to be committed to being tied down by the business.
What's the, like when you were a kid, what's the biggest like change in life that you can think of or remember? What would surprise you telling yourself when you were 15 that would be different than Rye?
What's different today than when you were 15 years old? if you're looking back as your 15-year-old self looking, what would surprise you the most?
The time frame that nothing is today, something gets built and a few years they're gonna tear it down and build something bigger and better. And I have a hard time accepting that change.
Good answer.
I'll just yell. Going the other way, what's something that wasn't right that you think we'd all kind of find hard to believe? Going like off that electric train that you think we should all know about?
Than there were back when I was growing up. Some of the things that went on back then just couldn't not function the same today, and it loses some of that community spirit. Things that I'd have to say this 400 celebration has been good for the community. But there aren't enough things like this that bring us together as a community and make us one big family. And it's hard to do because we're such a diverse group of people.
Good evening, sir. I would commend everybody here as an opportunity to go plowing for the Philbrick sometime. I can't tell you how much I've learned. Riding shotgun, going around. That house did this, somebody lived there. He knows everything at all. Fire hydrants, he knows everything. That's a side part. Can you tell a little bit about the landscape in town? You told me in the past that you could see the one at does it look differently than it
Does it look, the landscape of the town, does it look different than when you were growing up? Like Route 1?
Yes, it does look a lot different. One of the obvious things that is the number of houses where there used to be open fields. It was so open that back when we were kids, every winter they had a snow fence in the open fields to prevent the snow from blowing out of the fields and drifting to the road. I do have to tell you one story. My grandfather never drove a vehicle, a car. He always used a horse and wagon or oxen, but he would go into Portsmouth with vegetables and butter and eggs to sell at a market in Portsmouth on State Street. one day in April, sometime in the 1940s, he and Mr. Brown from down on Cable Road left and went to Portsmouth to sell the goods. It was raining when they left Rye. While they were in Portsmouth, it started snowing. And it snowed so hard that when they came home by way of Lang Road, and right in the vicinity of the Wedgewood Cemetery, they got stuck in a snowdrift and had to leave the wagon and walk the horses home there. And the landscape has changed because back then, Lang Road was a narrow road between two stone walls. And what happened was the snow blew over the stone walls and dropped into the road and created a drift that they couldn't get through. But now, one of those stone walls has been removed and the road is much, much wider than it used to be. So those are the type of things that have changed. I'd have to say for the better, because we have so much more traffic than it used to be. But in my own mind, it was a nice time back then.
We have time for one more question. Back there?
Right. I learned so much from this. Before I ask my question, I just want to try to answer a question. The first thing that popped in my mind, what do we used to have? Roger and I did Christmas that we don't have today. During the 1920s and 30s, the New Hampshire National Guard used to train in Rye for 2 weeks. And they bivouacked at Orleans Grove because it was natural spring. It was a wide open field, the fields that we miss, filled with tents. And those soldiers, every August for 2 weeks, would march up Maple Road onto Central, across the Neil Philbrick's, and they would train in that field. But the really big deal was, this is better than any fireworks display. This was an artillery unit, and they practiced at where Rye400 State Park is today, just out of the harbor, and they would fire their artillery at dummy airplanes that were pulled by live planes out to sea. And the traffic jams were incredible, because you imagine people coming down at that. And I always imagine what must have been like, all these young men descending on Rye. And what was it like for the local people? Particularly the young women, and how were these young men probably had no idea, but interesting to research. But what I want to ask Roger, just to speak briefly, because what he has been working on is so important. He's got at least 75 topics he's researched. He's trying to carry on from Langdon Parsons, who wrote that book in 1905. So Roger has been researching so much about the 20th century, which has helped me and kind of like Michael to meet this comment and Roger to be quick.
You've done a lot of research. So he's saying it's been a big contribution. So he wants you to comment on the research that you've done and why you've done it. Your interest in history. Why? Why are you doing all this research?
Like you, Alex, I feel it's important that we pass this information on, and without recording it and doing like you're doing with your book. I sure wish I had your ability and motivation to get it done, because it's easy to find the information, but to get it into a chronological order that makes sense takes a lot of time and effort and quietness, because you can't be disturbed and keep the concentration you need to do it. And I'm afraid I have too many things that I like to do also that keeps taking me away.
So Roger, I'm gonna take advantage of being right next to you. I'm gonna ask you the last question on that. You are a man that's living history in many different ways. You are a devoted family man. You're trying to keep up traditions. You're trying to help us understand the past by looking at the present and how we've changed. What do you want to leave behind that continues the legacy of the Philbrick family?
The big thing that I guess I want to find a way to keep the Philbrick property intact and keep it as an institution that the Philbricks have worked to create and to serve the public like we have all done throughout our life. Unfortunately, in today's society, we can't slow down life enough to take advantage of what it takes to learn everything that I was fortunate and my brothers were fortunate enough to learn from our dad. And that kind of knowledge is slowly slipping away. And then somehow or other, it would be great to be able to keep that knowledge in the system, whether it be through the schools or through programs that can participate. I'm very fortunate that my children take pride and enjoy making maple syrup, which is laborious, or we're gonna make cider shortly, but we do it as a family thing so that the littlest kids get to see that kind of camaraderie, that kind of experience, but get to see the benefits of all of it put together. And that's the type of thing that I feel is important to pass along, that unity that we've grown up with in our family and in this community, because I feel very blessed because I can look out into the audience and know 99% of the people that are looking back at me tonight. And it's a beautiful feeling that I have all this support. And I thank you all for having that courage in me.
Good night. Thank you, everyone. Excellent. Excellent.
Nobody did too much of a stuff.
Good job.
How did you do?
Good
Okay.
job.
All right.
Yes, perfect. Did you see the eye rolling? But it wasn't, he didn't say anything about his feel.
Well, I was waiting for
So with that, I'm kind of like.
I didn't have my glasses. Right ahead.
Nicely done.
He's going, he's already in.
Great job.
How are you?
Great
Good
job.
to see you. Thank you.
I didn't know you read the story here.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't do it.
I tried. I'm an amateur.
Oh, me? It's about his quality. He works they hire him. Yes, I did.